The first thing I saw after my mother said, "I got married this morning," was a bloodstain on the sleeve of the man waiting behind her. He smiled like nothing was wrong, slipped a wedding ring onto her finger again for my sake, and the silent man standing beside him never took his eyes off me. I almost laughed because it had to be a joke. My mother had spent 20 years avoiding dangerous people after my father died. Then, without warning, she married Vincent Moretti, a businessman every news station politely called untouchable. Everyone else used a simpler word: Mafia. The enormous estate overlooking the Hudson looked more like a private fortress than a home. Black SUVs lined the driveway. Armed security guards pretended they weren't armed. I wanted to drag Mom back into my car and leave. Instead, she squeezed my hand. "Please," she whispered, "just give this a chance." Before I could answer, Vincent's son stepped forward. He looked about my age, maybe 28. Tall, broad shoulders, dark ash-brown hair brushed neatly back, calm gray eyes that revealed almost nothing. "Rowan Moretti," he said. "I'm Callum Mercer." Our handshake lasted barely a second. His fingers suddenly tightened. "Don't react," he murmured so quietly I almost thought I imagined it. Then he released me and stepped back as if nothing had happened. My pulse jumped. "Don't react to what?" Before I could ask, shouting erupted near the front gate. One guard collapsed. Another reached for his weapon. A delivery van slammed through the security barrier. Everything exploded into motion. Vincent shoved my mother behind him. Security raced toward the entrance. I froze. Not because of the gunfire echoing across the driveway. Because Rowan didn't move toward his father. He moved toward me. He caught my shoulder and forced me behind a marble column just as glass shattered across the entrance hall. A bullet punched into the wall exactly where my head had been. "You stay here," Rowan ordered. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Then he stepped back into the open. Not to attack. To block the entrance with his own body while security dragged the wounded guard inside. The shooting stopped. Almost as quickly as it had started. The attackers fled. Silence settled over the estate, broken only by distant sirens. Rowan's white dress shirt now carried a narrow line of blood across one sleeve. His blood. He ignored it. Instead, he looked straight at me. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head. Only then did he glance at his own arm, as if the wound had just become noticeable. That made even less sense. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of police reports that somehow never mentioned organized crime, lawyers who appeared before anyone called them, and my mother's determined smile that looked more fragile every hour. She insisted everything was under control. No one believed her, least of all me. By sunset, I decided to leave. "I'll call you tomorrow," I told Mom. She hugged me tighter than usual. "Promise." "I promise." As I drove away from the estate, I checked my rearview mirror. A black SUV pulled onto the road behind me. Coincidence. 5 miles later. Still there. 10 miles. Still there. When I turned off the highway toward my apartment in Tarrytown, the SUV followed. I parked. It parked across the street. I walked into a grocery store. The driver remained inside. I came back 20 minutes later. The SUV was still waiting. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Who is this?" "You noticed." Rowan's calm voice carried through the speaker. "Why are you following me?" "I'm making sure you get home." "I don't need a babysitter." "No," he replied quietly. "You need someone they won't shoot first." The line went dead. Cold settled beneath my ribs. They. Not us. Not my family. They. I looked toward the black SUV. Rowan stepped out, leaning casually against the driver's door as if he had every right to be there. His injured arm remained tucked behind his back. He never once looked toward me. Instead, his eyes stayed fixed on the dark sedan parked half a block away. A sedan I could have sworn hadn't been there a minute earlier. Its engine started. The headlights came on. And for the first time that day, Rowan looked genuinely afraid. The sedan rolled away the second Rowan stepped into the street. He did not chase it. He stood perfectly still until its taillights disappeared around the corner. Only then did his shoulders loosen by a fraction. I crossed the street before I could talk myself out of it. Who were they? They left. That is not an answer. It is the only one I can give. His sleeve had turned crimson near his elbow. Up close, the cut looked deeper than I had realized. "You need stitches." "I have had worse." "You are bleeding through your shirt." He glanced down as though I had pointed out a wrinkle instead of an injury. "It can wait." "It cannot." For the first time, his expression cracked. Not with pain. with hesitation. I cannot stay in one place for long. The words landed strangely. Not because they sounded dramatic, because they sounded practiced. A city bus pulled between us for a few seconds. When it passed, Rowan was already scanning rooftops, parked cars, windows, every reflection in every storefront. He was watching everything except me. You really think someone is following me? I know they are. And who exactly are they? Silence. He looked toward the darkening street instead of answering. A cold breeze swept between the buildings. Without saying a word, Rowan stepped closer and gently turned me by the shoulders. What are you doing? The window. What window? The one behind you. I looked. The glass front of the coffee shop reflected both of us, and another figure standing half a block away. The man lowered his phone the instant our eyes met and disappeared into the crowd. By the time I turned back, Rowan had already started walking. Come on. I am not following you. You already are. I hated that he was right. 3 blocks later, we slipped into a 24-hour urgent care clinic. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. The nurse frowned when she saw Rowan's arm. You should have come sooner. I was busy. She disappeared to prepare a treatment room. I folded my arms. You risked getting shot for someone you met 6 hours ago. I made a decision. Why? His gray eyes settled on mine for several quiet seconds. I could live with getting hurt. He looked away before finishing. I could not live with making the wrong choice. Before I could ask what that meant, the nurse called his name. The door closed behind him. I remained alone in the waiting room. 5 minutes later, a police officer entered, speaking quietly with the receptionist. He showed her a photograph. She pointed toward Rowan's treatment room. Something inside me tightened. The officer had almost reached the hallway when Vincent Moretti's head of security walked through the entrance. He intercepted the officer with remarkable politeness. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. The officer frowned, glanced once toward the hallway, then simply left. No report. No questions. Nothing. The security chief noticed me watching. We should get you home, Mr. Mercer. I can drive myself. That was not a suggestion. His tone remained respectful, but the meaning was unmistakable. Before either of us moved, Rowan emerged with fresh bandages wrapped neatly around his arm. His eyes went immediately to the security chief. What happened? The police. They are gone. They should never have been here. Something flashed across Rowan's face. Relief. Not because the police had left, because they had arrived too late. The security chief handed Rowan a sealed envelope. No one else touched it. Rowan accepted it without opening it. His fingers tightened around the paper. Then, unexpectedly, he held it out to me. What is this? I need you to keep it. I stared at him. You barely know me. Exactly. I do not understand. They will search my house. They will not search yours. Before I could refuse, he slipped the envelope into the inside pocket of my jacket. His hand paused for the briefest second, careful not to press against the fabric harder than necessary. It was the first time he had touched me without pulling me away from danger. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. Whatever happens, do not let anyone know you have it. The security chief looked genuinely confused. You are trusting him? Rowan answered without taking his eyes off me. I am trying to keep him alive. My heartbeat quickened. I reached into my jacket after we stepped outside. The envelope had not been sealed. Inside was a single faded photograph. A much younger Vincent Moretti stood beside my late father, both smiling at the camera as if they had been close friends. On the back, written in fading blue ink, were 5 words. If anything happens, protect Callum. The photograph trembled between my fingers long after Rowan drove away. My father had died when I was 12. My mother had always said he had been an accountant who kept his head down and stayed away from dangerous people. The smile on that faded photograph told a different story. It was not the smile of strangers. It was the smile of men who trusted each other. I slipped the picture back into the envelope before I reached my apartment. The hallway lights flickered as I unlocked my door. Something felt wrong. The deadbolt had been scratched. Not broken. Tested. I stepped back instinctively. A hand caught my wrist before I could touch the handle. Do not go inside. Rowan's voice stayed low. I stared at him. You followed me again. I never stopped. You have got to explain something. I cannot. You expect me to trust you anyway? His eyes met mine. No. That answer hit harder than another excuse would have. I expect you to survive. Before I could argue, 2 members of Vincent's security team quietly entered the apartment. Less than a minute later, one of them emerged carrying a tiny black device sealed inside an evidence bag. A camera, he said. Recently installed. My stomach tightened. Someone had entered my home. Someone had expected me to come back. Rowan never looked surprised. Only disappointed. They are moving faster. They? I snapped. How many times are you going to say that before you tell me who they are? His jaw tightened, but he remained silent. One of the security men approached. The house is no longer safe. I am not going back to your father's estate. You are. I said no. Rowan dismissed the guard with a small gesture. The man immediately stepped away. Then Rowan looked back at me. You can hate me tomorrow. His voice barely rose above a whisper. But tonight you are coming with me. For several seconds, neither of us moved. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to demand answers. Instead, I looked toward my apartment door. Someone had hidden a camera inside my home. Someone had been waiting. I closed my eyes. One night. Rowan nodded once. No longer if I can help it. The drive back to the estate happened mostly in silence. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. Halfway there, Rowan removed his suit jacket and quietly placed it over my lap. You are cold. I am fine. You have been rubbing your hands together for 10 minutes. I had not even realized I was doing it. The jacket still carried the faint scent of cedar and rain. He turned his attention back to the road before I could thank him. The distance between us felt different now. Still cautious. No longer hostile. By the time we reached the estate, every entrance had doubled its security. Vincent met us in his study. His expression changed the instant he saw the photograph. You opened it. I needed to know why my father was standing beside you. Vincent lowered himself slowly into his chair. I hoped you would never see that picture. My mother told me he had nothing to do with your world. He wanted that lie. The room fell silent. Rowan remained near the door instead of sitting. Watching. Always watching. Vincent rested both hands on his desk. Your father saved my life once. I waited. So you promised to protect me? No. His voice grew quieter. I promised to disappear from your family's lives. My pulse stumbled. Then why marry my mother? Pain crossed Vincent's face for the first time. Because someone else found you before I did. Before another question could leave my mouth, the study door burst open. The head of security stepped inside, breathing hard. They breached the east perimeter. Every light inside the estate instantly switched to emergency power. The room dropped into darkness before dim backup lights flickered on. Rowan moved without hesitation. He stepped directly in front of me. Not dramatically, simply placing his body between mine and the windows. A loud crack echoed outside. Glass shattered somewhere down the hallway. Vincent reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a worn leather folder, and pressed it into Rowan's free hand. If they get inside, he said quietly, he learns everything. Rowan did not take his eyes off the doorway. He is not ready. You do not get to choose anymore. Callum looked from the folder to Rowan. For the first time since they met, Rowan's calm mask slipped. It was not fear for himself. It was fear of what Callum would become once he finally opened the file. Rowan did not open the leather folder. Instead, he slipped it beneath his jacket as another sharp crack echoed through the hallway. Stay behind me. Those 3 words came without hesitation. I obeyed before I realized I had made the choice. The security team swept through the corridor with practiced precision. Within minutes, the alarms shifted from a piercing warning to a steady tone. One of the guards returned, breathing hard. The intruders pulled back. They never crossed the inner grounds. Vincent nodded once. They were testing us. No one argued. The emergency lights slowly gave way to the warm glow of the chandeliers. Broken glass glittered across the marble floor like scattered ice. Rowan finally looked at me. Come with me. He led me away from the study instead of toward the guest rooms. We walked through quiet hallways until we reached a small conservatory tucked behind the main house. Rain tapped gently against the glass ceiling. For the first time since I had arrived, there were no guards. No shouting. No alarms. Only rows of citrus trees and the scent of damp soil. You come here often? I asked. When I need silence. He picked a fallen leaf from the stone path without thinking, turning it between his fingers before setting it carefully on a nearby bench. It was the first ordinary thing I had ever seen him do. You knew they would come tonight. I hoped I was wrong. And you still brought me here. I brought you somewhere I could protect. The answer settled quietly between us. Not dramatic. Simply true. I looked at the fresh bandage beneath his rolled sleeve. You should be resting. So should you. I am serious. So am I. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt shared. A faint shiver ran through me as the evening air cooled. Without asking, Rowan stepped beside one of the outdoor heaters and adjusted the valve until warm air drifted across the room. He never mentioned that he had noticed. He simply made sure I stopped shivering. Something inside me softened. You always take care of everyone like this? His eyes remained on the rain beyond the glass. No. So why me? His fingers tightened briefly around the edge of the bench. I made a promise. The familiar answer should have frustrated me. Instead, it sounded heavier than before, as if the promise had cost him more than I understood. A vibration broke the quiet. My phone. It was my mother. I answered immediately. Mom. Her voice trembled with relief. Are you safe? I am fine. I heard there was another security incident. I am okay. She hesitated. Rowan is with you, is he not? I glanced toward him. He had stepped several feet away, giving me privacy without being asked. Yes. Another pause. Then I can finally sleep tonight. The call ended a few seconds later. I stared at the dark screen. Even my mother trusted him, more than she trusted the walls around her. When I looked up again, Rowan was standing beside the glass doors, watching the rain spill down the hillside. You heard that. I was trying not to. You could have. I know. He offered the smallest hint of a smile. It disappeared almost immediately. We started back toward the main house together. The stone path had grown slick from the rain. My foot slipped. Before I could catch myself, Rowan reached for me. His hand closed around mine. Firm. Steady. Neither of us spoke. He did not pull me closer than necessary. He simply waited until I found my balance. When I did, neither of us let go right away. The rain muffled every sound around us. For one suspended moment, the world felt strangely distant. Then Rowan slowly released my hand. Almost reluctantly. Inside the house, Vincent had already retired upstairs. Only the head of security remained in the study. He handed Rowan a fresh report. No additional movement. Rowan accepted it with a nod. As he turned away, a folded piece of paper slipped from the leather folder hidden beneath his jacket. It landed at my feet before either of us noticed. I bent down and picked it up. It was old, yellowed. Across the top, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, Guardian Assignment, Rowan Moretti. Before I could read another line, Rowan gently took the page from my hand. His voice was calm, but his fingers trembled for the first time since we met. I was never supposed to let you see this. For the first time, I no longer wondered whether Rowan was protecting me. I only wondered why my father had trusted him long before I ever had. Rowan did not try to take the document again. He simply looked at it as though it belonged to another lifetime. I said quietly, you owe me the truth. His shoulders rose with a slow breath before falling again. Yes. He led me back into the study. Vincent remained standing by the fireplace, the flames painting deep shadows across his face. When he saw the paper in my hand, he closed his eyes for a brief moment. It was supposed to stay hidden, Vincent said. It did not, I answered. Start talking. No one interrupted the silence that followed. Finally, Vincent spoke. Your father was never part of my organization. The words caught me off guard. He was the man who exposed the people inside it. I frowned. I do not understand. There was another faction, Vincent continued. They wanted to turn everything into fear, extortion, and bloodshed. Your father spent years gathering evidence against them. Quietly, patiently. I looked down at the old photograph. So he was working with you. He was working against them. The difference mattered. He refused every offer to disappear, Vincent said. He believed the only way to protect his family was to make certain those men could never reach power. My chest tightened. My father was killed because of that. Vincent lowered his head. Yes. The room seemed to shrink around me. Every story my mother had told me. Every ordinary memory. Every quiet explanation about a simple accident. None of it had been true. I turned toward Rowan. You knew? He did not deny it. I knew. For how long? My entire adult life. Something inside me cracked. You watched me stand at my father's grave knowing why he died. His jaw tightened. Yes. You watched me. Believe a lie. Yes. And you said nothing. His voice barely carried across the room. Because your father asked me to. The words hit harder than anger. Vincent crossed to an old cabinet and unlocked a drawer. Inside rested a worn leather journal. He handed it to me. It belonged to your father. The first page carried familiar handwriting. If you are reading this, then Rowan failed. I stared at the sentence. Failed. My hands began to shake as I turned the page. I chose him because he was the only person I trusted to keep my son away from this truth for as long as possible. The next lines blurred before my eyes. If Callum knows why I died, he will spend his life trying to finish what I started. Do not let him become me. My throat tightened. I looked up at Rowan. You promised him. Yes. You were protecting his secret. I was protecting you. Everything suddenly rearranged itself. The shooting at the estate. The black SUV following me. The hidden camera in my apartment. The envelope. The photograph. Every time Rowan refused to answer. Every time he stepped between me and danger. None of it had been about controlling me. It had been about obeying a promise made years before we had ever met. The truth answered every question I had been carrying. And somehow it hurt even more because of it. You had a choice, I whispered. I did. You could have trusted me. I could not betray your father. And betraying me was easier? His silence became the answer. I stepped backward. The distance between us felt enormous. You decided what my life should be. I decided to keep you alive. You decided I did not deserve the truth. His gray eyes finally lifted to mine. I decided you deserved a chance to live without this weight. A bitter laugh escaped me. You stole that choice. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Rowan did not defend himself. He simply accepted them. I know. For several seconds, neither of us moved. The warmth that had slowly grown between us over the past few days seemed to dissolve into the quiet. I remembered his jacket around my shoulders, his hand catching mine on the rain-soaked path, the way he always watched the exits, instead of the conversation. Now every memory carried a second meaning. Not affection, duty, or at least that was all I could bear to believe. I cannot stay here. Callum, no. I raised a hand before he could come closer. For the first time since we met, he stopped because I asked him to. That somehow hurt most of all. I walked out of the study without looking back. At the front entrance, I paused only long enough to hand his jacket to one of the guards. Give this back to him. Outside, the rain had stopped. Behind me, the mansion remained brightly lit. No footsteps followed. No one tried to stop me. Inside the doorway, Rowan stood exactly where I had left him, one hand resting against the frame, watching me disappear into the darkness. He kept the promise he had made to my father. For the first time, he chose not to follow me. And somehow, that choice hurt both of us more than every step he had taken beside me. The hotel room felt smaller than it had the night before. I had chosen it because no one knew I was there. That turned out to be another lie. When I opened the curtains just after sunrise, a black SUV sat across the street. It did not move. It did not hide. It simply waited. I let the curtain fall. For several long seconds, I stood without moving. Then I picked up my phone. No messages. Not from my mother. Not from Vincent. Not from Rowan. The silence somehow hurt more than another argument would have. I left through the rear exit instead of the lobby. The SUV remained in front of the hotel. It never followed. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made me wonder whether someone else already was. I spent the morning walking through crowded streets, changing directions without thinking, stopping wherever people gathered. By early afternoon, the same man appeared twice in different places. Dark baseball cap, gray jacket, always pretending to check his phone. I turned suddenly into a bookstore. The man kept walking. Maybe I had imagined everything. I reached for a history book near the back shelves. A folded receipt slipped from between the pages. Leave through the employee exit. Do not look around. The handwriting was unmistakable. Rowan. I stared at the note for one heartbeat too long. Then the fire alarm erupted throughout the building. Customers hurried toward the front entrance. I slipped quietly through the rear hallway instead. The employee exit opened into a narrow alley. Rowan was already there. Rain had started again. He stood beneath no shelter at all. You should not have come, I said. I know. Then why are you here? Because the man in the gray jacket was not alone. A black sedan rolled slowly past the end of the alley. Neither of us moved until it disappeared. Only then did Rowan finally breathe. You could have texted me. If they have your phone, they have mine. You still think someone is watching every step I take. I stopped thinking. He looked at me. I know. The words carried no pride. Only exhaustion. A gust of wind pushed cold rain into the alley. Without speaking, Rowan removed his coat and placed it over my shoulders. I instinctively caught his wrist. You will freeze. I have another jacket in the car. You are lying. A faint smile almost appeared. Yes. For one suspended moment, neither of us let go. Rain dripped from his hair onto the pavement between us. His pulse beat steadily beneath my fingers. Then I released him first. He gently adjusted the coat around my shoulders without meeting my eyes. Neither of us mentioned how natural the gesture had become. A phone vibrated inside his pocket. He glanced at the screen. The color drained from his face. I have to go. What happened? My father. He put the phone away before it rang again. I cannot explain. You never do. The words escaped before I could stop them. They landed harder than I intended. Rowan nodded once. I know. He turned to leave. As he reached the mouth of the alley, he staggered. Only slightly. But enough. A dark stain spread beneath the back of his shirt. Not fresh. Old blood. The bandage on his arm had bled through again, and another wound marked his side where the fabric clung to him. You are hurt. It is nothing. It is not nothing. He steadied himself against the brick wall for only a second before standing straight again. I will heal. You should be in a hospital. I cannot. You always have another reason. I always have another responsibility. He walked toward the waiting car before I could answer. The driver opened the door. As Rowan climbed inside, he paused long enough to look back at me. Not with hope. Not asking for forgiveness. Only making certain I was still standing safely beneath the awning. The car pulled away. Something caught the wind and landed near my feet. A folded medical discharge form. It must have slipped from his pocket. I picked it up. The date was 3 days before my mother married Vincent. The injury listed across the top was not the cut on his arm. It described emergency surgery after multiple gunshot wounds. The discharge instructions ended with one handwritten warning from the attending physician. Patient repeatedly refuses extended treatment despite life-threatening blood loss. I lowered the paper slowly. For the first time, I realized Rowan had not started sacrificing himself after we met. He had simply never stopped. I folded the medical discharge form and slipped it into my wallet. I told myself I kept it because it might become evidence. The lie lasted less than an hour. By evening, I was standing outside St. Gabriel Medical Center, staring at the entrance Rowan had refused to use. The physician whose name appeared on the discharge papers agreed to see me for exactly 5 minutes. I cannot discuss a patient's medical records, she said. I know. You should not even have that document. I found it. She studied my face for a long moment. You are Callum. It was not a question. You know my name? I know the man who nearly died saying it. The room fell silent. She looked toward the closed office door before lowering her voice. When he regained consciousness after surgery, he refused additional treatment. Why? He believed someone was waiting for him. My throat tightened. He kept asking the same question. She hesitated. Was Callum safe? Nothing else. Not his father. Not himself. Only me. I thanked her and walked outside before she could see my expression break. The rain had finally stopped. My phone rang. It was my mother. Where are you? She asked. Downtown. You cannot go back to your apartment. I know. There is something else. Her voice trembled. Vincent collapsed this afternoon. I stopped walking. What happened? The doctors think it was stress. She paused. But Rowan is gone. What do you mean gone? He left the estate. My heartbeat stumbled. No one knows where. The call ended. I drove to the Moretti estate anyway. The front gate stood open for the first time since I had arrived there. Security guards packed equipment into unmarked vehicles. The atmosphere felt strangely defeated. Vincent sat alone in the study, looking years older than he had only days before. He resigned, Vincent said before I could ask. He cannot resign. He already did. Why? Vincent looked toward the empty chair Rowan had always occupied during meetings. Because I gave him an order. I stared at him. I told him to stop protecting you. The words landed like a punch. He refused. Vincent's tired eyes met mine. So I removed him from every responsibility connected to this family. You fired your own son. I freed him. Vincent let out a bitter laugh. He did not see it that way. The room suddenly felt unbearably quiet. He left without taking anything except one suitcase. And he just disappeared? He made one request before he walked away. Vincent reached into his desk drawer and handed me a small brass key. He said if you ever came back, you deserve this. The key opened a locker inside the estate's private garage. There was no money, no weapons, only a cardboard box. Inside lay neatly organized folders, maps, spare phones, emergency cash, and copies of my apartment keys, car keys, and office badge. Everything someone would need to keep another person alive. At the bottom rested dozens of sealed envelopes. Each carried a handwritten date. Every birthday I had celebrated since turning 13. Every Christmas. Every college graduation. Every milestone. None had ever been mailed. My hands shook as I opened the oldest one. Inside was a single sentence. Happy 13th birthday, Callum. I hope you never learn my name. Another. Happy 18th birthday. I am glad you still smile. Another. Congratulations on your first job. You looked proud walking into the building this morning. The letters stopped 3 weeks ago. The final envelope remained unsealed. I opened it carefully. I wanted to tell you the truth the day we shook hands. I almost did. The words blurred. Instead, I folded the letter shut before reading another line. I could not bear it. Not yet. Outside the garage, tires crunched across the gravel. One of Vincent's security chiefs hurried toward us. They found him. I looked up instantly. Where? He turned himself over to federal investigators. Vincent closed his eyes. He is claiming responsibility for everything. That is impossible. He says he acted alone. My chest tightened. He is lying. Yes. He is protecting someone. Vincent looked directly at me. He always has been. The security chief's phone rang again. His face lost all color as he listened. What is it? Vincent demanded. The guard lowered the phone slowly. The investigators are holding a press conference tomorrow morning. He swallowed hard. They are bringing Rowan out in public. The courthouse steps overflowed with reporters long before sunrise. Camera crews crowded against metal barricades. Federal agents formed 2 silent lines from the entrance to a waiting transport vehicle. I had watched enough news conferences to know how this would end. A man would be blamed. A story would be accepted. Everyone would go home believing justice had been served. Except today, I knew the man. And I knew he was lying. I pushed through the crowd until an agent stopped me. You cannot cross the barrier. I need to speak to Rowan Moretti. He is unavailable. He is innocent. The agent's expression never changed. So says every family member. I am not his family. The words left my mouth before I realized how much they hurt. A movement near the courthouse doors drew every camera at once. Rowan emerged between 2 federal agents. His suit had been replaced by plain clothes. The bandage beneath his collar showed above the neckline. He looked thinner, more tired. But the moment his eyes found me across the crowd, everything else disappeared. He did not smile. He simply checked that I was unharmed. Even now. Even here. A prosecutor stepped toward the microphones. Rowan Moretti has voluntarily accepted full responsibility for the sentence never finished. A delivery truck ignored the police barricades and accelerated toward the entrance. People screamed. Reporters scattered. Agents reached for their weapons. Time seemed to fracture. The truck was not heading toward Rowan. It was heading toward the crowd. Toward me. I froze for one impossible second. Rowan did not. Despite the agents gripping his arms, he twisted free with a force that nearly sent all 3 men to the pavement. He ran. Not away from danger. Straight into it. Callum. I had never heard him raise his voice before. He slammed into me just as the truck mounted the curb. We crashed across the concrete together. His body shielded mine from flying debris as the truck smashed into the empty barricades where I had been standing. The impact echoed across the plaza. Metal folded. Glass burst outward. When everything stopped moving, Rowan was still covering me. His breathing came in uneven bursts. Blood spread through the back of his shirt. Fresh blood. Not from today alone. Rowan, I am here. You are hurt. I know. Only after hearing my voice did he try to stand. His legs failed beneath him. The nearest agents rushed forward. So did every television camera. No one could pretend they had not seen what happened. The prosecutor lowered his prepared statement. The plaza had witnessed the truth before hearing a single word. Rowan had chosen me in front of the entire country. At the cost of everything he had left. Federal agents moved to separate us. I stepped between them. No. Sir, step aside. He needs a doctor. We need the prisoner. You need a medic first. My voice carried farther than I intended. The cameras remained fixed on us. An emergency physician knelt beside Rowan. As she cut away the damaged fabric, she stopped. There are old surgical scars everywhere. Another medic looked up in disbelief. These injuries never fully healed. The physician glanced at me. He should not even have been walking. Rowan quietly reached for my sleeve. His hand barely closed around the fabric before slipping away. Again, I am sorry. The words were almost lost beneath the sirens. For what? For taking your choices. His eyes closed briefly. But never for protecting you. A black SUV rolled into the secured area. Vincent stepped out before anyone could stop him. He walked directly toward the microphones instead of his son. I will testify. The reporters fell silent. I ordered Rowan to protect Callum after his father's death. Every action my son took was under my instruction or in fulfillment of a promise made to a dying man. He looked toward Rowan. I kept asking him to choose this family. His voice broke. He chose the right one instead. No one spoke. Not the prosecutors. Not the agents. Not the reporters. The silence said more than any argument could. The physician finished stabilizing Rowan before the stretcher was lifted. As they prepared to wheel him toward the ambulance, I walked beside him. Our hands found each other without either of us reaching very far. Neither of us tried to hold tightly. Neither of us wanted to let go. You should have stayed away, Rowan whispered. I tried. A faint smile finally reached his eyes. I noticed. The ambulance doors began to close. Just before they shut completely, I slipped the final unopened letter from his box into his hand. You kept writing. I never stopped. You can finish telling me yourself. For the first time since this began, hope did not feel impossible. It simply felt overdue. The ambulance doors opened just after dawn. Rowan looked pale beneath the hospital lights, but for the first time since I had met him, no one was ordering him to move, to protect, or to sacrifice. The room was quiet. I stepped inside carrying the last unopened letter. You kept your promise, I said. His tired smile barely appeared. I tried. You almost died doing it. I would make the same choice. I shook my head. No. He looked at me, confused. This time we choose together. The words settled between us with the same quiet weight as every moment we had almost spoken the truth. Neither of us reached for the other. Not yet. A gentle knock interrupted the silence. Vincent entered more slowly than I had ever seen him walk. He carried no guards, no lawyers, no authority, only a folder. The prosecutors accepted my testimony, he said. They matched it with your father's journals, financial records, and the evidence he hid years ago. He placed the folder on the bedside table. The people responsible for your father's murder have been arrested. The room became completely still. The organization they built is finished. Vincent looked toward me. I could not keep my promise to your father. His voice broke. But I can finally keep this one. He extended his hand. You and your mother are free. For the first time in decades, the burden that had shaped every decision in my life no longer belonged to anyone in the room. It simply ended. Vincent quietly left without waiting for forgiveness. The door clicked shut behind him. I looked at Rowan. So it is over. He nodded. The promises. The words should have brought relief. Instead, they left an empty space neither of us knew how to cross. You are free now, I said. Yes. You do not have to stay. No. You do not have to protect me. I do not. Silence returned. Different this time. Not filled with secrets. Filled with choice. I placed the unopened letter in his hand. You never finished this one. He turned it over slowly. I was afraid. You? He gave a quiet laugh. I knew how to protect you. His eyes lifted to mine. I did not know how to ask you to stay. He unfolded the paper. Half the page remained blank. Only one paragraph had been written. If the day ever comes when you no longer need protection, I hope I have enough courage to ask whether you might still want me beside you. He stopped reading. I never found the courage. You just did. The distance between us suddenly felt much shorter. I stepped closer. Not because danger forced me there. Not because anyone had asked me to. Because I wanted to. I reached for his hand. This time he did not catch mine to pull me away from harm. He simply held it. Carefully. As though it were something precious instead of something fragile. I spent my whole life believing everyone who loved me would eventually disappear. I said. My father. I swallowed. The truth. My own. Certainty. I smiled through eyes that refused to stay dry. I do not want fear making my choices anymore. His thumb brushed gently across the back of my hand. And what do you want? You. The answer came more easily than I expected. Not because of a promise. Not because of guilt. Because every time I looked for safety, I tightened my fingers around his. I was already looking at you. His eyes closed for a brief second. When they opened again, The weight he had carried for years seemed finally to lift. I choose you too, he said softly. Not as an assignment. Not as a guardian. As the man I love. The afternoon sunlight filled the room. Weeks later, after Rowan recovered, we drove together to the quiet cemetery where my father rested beneath an old maple tree. I placed fresh flowers beside the headstone. Rowan remained a respectful step behind until I turned toward him. You can come closer. He did. For the first time, there was no distance left to protect, only a future waiting to be lived. As we walked back toward the car, clouds gathered overhead and the first drops of rain began to fall. Rowan opened an umbrella above us both. Months earlier, he would have stood alone in the rain so I could stay dry. Now I reached up, tilted the umbrella until it covered him too, and slipped my free hand into his. Together we walked forward beneath the same shelter, choosing each other with every step.